All right. So basically, organizational, like it's a widespread saying that employees, be it anyone, cannot work in a value-free vacuum. And that vacuum is called organizational culture. The way an individual's work is defined, it is governed and designed in an organization is all dependent upon the organization's culture, and it is unique to every organization. So it is the set of values, beliefs, goals, objective norms that together make culture of an organization, which is again mentioning unique to the organization. Correct. So now, why is it so important? Why do we, it is sort of a buzzword that, I want to go in a culture which is people centric. I want to work in an organization which values their employee. Toxic work culture, these are some words we keep on hearing here and there. So what does it really mean? All right, so we'll come to that. But first, let's start discussing the elements of an organizational culture. Now, we'll think of this as a concentric circle. There are three core elements of an organizational culture. So, first are artifacts. Now, artifacts, think of it as in the concentric circle as the outermost layer of a culture, which is the most visible layer, the more like the something that is quite visible, and this can include the dress code of the organization, the rituals in the organization, the functions in the organization, awards given in the organization, ceremonies, anything that is done that is quite visible to us, right? That is like the way people speak in the organization, the language and all, everything comes under the artifacts, which is the outermost layer of the organization. Then comes the give me 1 second. So sorry, guys. So coming back to the elements of the organization, first was artifacts, which is the outermost layer of the organization, most visible and conscious layer of an organizational culture. Then we move on to the norms and values. Now, these are the philosophy, goals, objectives of the organization that the organization sets, which are called the espoused value, which the organization sets for itself when they're recruiting employees, selecting, onboarding. And then comes the enacted ones, which the employees interpret, which they think this is what our organization is, this is how we work in this organization. So these comes in the inner layer of the organizational culture diagram. Then the deepest level of organizational culture are the basic assumptions. Now these are unconscious, taken for granted beliefs in the organization, where it is said that this is how the work is done. It has been deep rooted since a really long time. And it can be anything. It can be the way people communicate, if there is hierarchy, if there is a culture of, everyone here respects work and personal life, and everyone logs out at a particular time, no one disturbs. So it becomes like a unsaid thing in the organization. All right, so these are different elements of the organization in which only the artifacts are the ones which are really visible. Rest all is at a subconscious and unconscious level. So that's why it becomes very difficult to sort of manage and change if required. Now, anyone has any question? No questions? So you can also let me know if anyone puts a question in the chat box. If
Yeah,
I miss
sure.
it, you can let me know. Great.
Yeah, sure.
So now I will take a model which is Hofstede's cultural model to describe you more about culture globally. So has anyone here ever heard about Hofstede's cultural model? If anyone is from psychology background, or has anyone ever heard? Great. Suchitra has heard. So basically, there are 6 dimensions in this model, and the psychologist Hofstede, who was a social psychologist, has very smartly tried to cover all the dimensions of culture that can fall within an organization. So first and foremost, the most important dimension is the power distance, which means if the organization is really hierarchy or if it's egalitarian. Also, is everyone comfortable if I speak in Hindi as well, like the combination of Hindi and English? You can put a thumbs up also. Okay, so power distance is either the organization can be very hierarchical. That means there are a lot of layers and lot of levels in which the communication is done, or it can be egalitarian, or which also means flat culture, where people can, whoever they want to speak to can speak directly. They don't need to go through different channels of communication to reach the top level management, or however they want to go about it. So in an organization, they can fall within a spectrum. Now, of course, a lot of organizations can be highly hierarchical or bureaucratic, where there are a lot of channels to communicate, whereas an organization can be very flat. Now, a very good example of a flat organization is Tesla. If you must have read in Tesla, Elon Musk says that there is no point in, if you want to convey something to me, convey it to me. If you have a problem, if you have an idea, just, and it is related to me, that it needs to be conversed with me, just directly talk to me. He believes that there's no point in wasting time by going through various channels and reaching the person that you want to reach. Whereas in government settings in India also, we must have seen a lot of levels through which you want to, if you want to put a problem across, you have to first go to somebody, then go to somebody. So it's based on the organization, how they want to go about it, and also is really dependent upon the country, how like how the country is, what are their ways of communication, the norms and everything that they follow. Moving on to that comes masculine versus feminine culture. So here masculine culture means a culture which has very rigid gender divisions, and which believes that okay, this work can only be done by men, this work can only be done by female, and it also promotes an unhealthy view of work and life. In a masculine culture, the balance between work and life is not really cared or appreciated, whereas in a feminine culture, a lot of importance is given on a good work life balance, a good separation between your personal life, your work life, and there is gender fluidity. The tasks are not defined on the base of the person's gender, right? And again, take the example of countries like Sweden. They are high on feminism. That's why their happiness index is also high, because they believe that there has to be a proper distinction between work and personal life. And then we can also take examples of country like US and India. You can also visit the stats where the masculine culture is little, like it leans towards the masculine culture, where the gender roles are more defined, especially when it comes to India, right? And moving on to the third dimension, which is the uncertainty avoidance index, which means how comfortable a company is towards uncertainty, or do they want a rigid structure. So a lot of times it also depends upon the leader. If you've heard of a leadership which can be a transactional leader, a leader which expects a person to do what they're asked to do, and that's about it. So in these types of areas where the everything, every role, everything is defined, is where uh, people are less open to uncertainty, and they want things to be done in a particular way. Whereas there are companies who are like, let's take risk. If you have an idea, if you want to do something, let's let's see, let's experiment, let's explore. And this is also, so we can't really say that a company should be very open to uncertainty avoidance in this or should not be. It really depends upon the type of industry it is. Say if it's design or creativity sector, they might be open to taking more risk and introducing new patterns and themes. Whereas if there is, say, a production sector, then if they have a way of working and everything, they might not want to hinder too like tamper to so much to it, because there is machinery involved and a lot of other things involved, right? So it really depends upon the sector. Moving on comes the indulgence versus resistance. It might be a little similar to uncertainty avoidance index, but it also has its own meaning. So in a indulgent culture, the company again is more open to trying new things, and it highly also depends upon the country that you are in. So for example, China is high on resistance. They want their things to be done in a certain way. They want it everyone to follow a particular thing. It also, like, also because they have a communist government, so it talks a lot about that also, that they have fixed, like, you can only use these social media channels, you can only do this, you have to do the work like this. So that's why it's more resistance, whereas a lot of cultures are more indulgent. Let's go for it, let's combine with this company, let's talk to these people, what if we get to know something more, all of that. Then the fifth dimension is long term goals versus short term goals. So every company sets their own goals again based on the country that they are in, the industry that they are in. So short term goals are, okay, this is our goal for the next quarter, let's focus on it. This is what you have to achieve in the next month, let's just do that. Whereas long term goals are, you really plan for long term. And South Korea is a country which has 100%, like when you see their percentages, they 100% focus on long term goals, where they do not focus on short term gratifications. Their vision is that we want to implement everything that is long lasting, say 5-year plan or something like that. And last but not the least is individualistic culture, whereas a collectivist culture, where in an individualistic culture, people's main aim is to see how they are independently performing. So America, very, very high on individualistic culture, where they focus on themselves, their needs as independent people. Whereas in a collectivist culture, a team, like, you look at the team's growth, you look at your growth in a way that, are you catering your team, are you catering your family? So India, having collectivist culture. So this was a very well explained model by Hofstede to explain different dimensions of culture which are present in a company, which are influenced by the industry, by the country, and everything. Correct? So now, having said that, anyone has any doubts? Do you want me to repeat any dimension? Okay, moving on. Now, now that we've understood culture is so deep seated in the organization, it basically defines how people communicate in the workplace, how they set boundaries between their personal and professional life, what are the types of appraisals that they go through, how open, how much say they have in the organization. We do have a clear understanding that it's not very easy to tamper with the workplace culture, right? It's not that you can simply change it. Correct? So there were different theorists who said that workplace culture can easily be changed. We just go implement, we discover what we want, we change it. That's not possible. Then there were people who said, theorists who said that it's not possible to change at all, because culture is made of, the organizational culture is made of the people in the organization, and a lot of, like, and they come with their own set of experiences, their beliefs, and then they make the organization. So if you're trying to change the culture, are you trying to change people as a whole? A lot of people might have also said that. And then comes the realist, where you're like, okay, we don't need to change the organization when required the culture, because it directly impacts the brand image of the organization. Organization culture speaks volumes about the company. If, like, we all know, like, if there's any bad statement like which goes out about a company, for example, a couple of many years back, say 10 years back, in Google, 20,000 employees just walked out of Google, just walked out. And what was the main reason? Because the culture was getting to maximum. There's a little bit of disturbance, Asia. Yeah. So in Google, about 20,000 of the employees just walked out. And most of them were females because there was a lot of difference in the payrolls. There was a lot of discrimination in the way they treated males and females and all. And then they really understood that there was something wrong with their culture, where they then worked on it. Because companies have to understand, and they do understand, that keeping a good culture is so important. And during this time, in the last 16, 17 months, it has gained more and more importance, that culture needs to be people centric. You have to value people. You can't consider people as indispensable, dispensable, or like, it's okay. So that's why culture is so important. But now think about it. If the Is it that easy to change it? There are people who've been working since a while. They have accommodated to a lot of things. It's not that easy. But if the organizations do not pay attention on working and understanding what is actually happening, it can be very, very expensive for them. This is one of the major mistakes made by organizations, where they think that, maybe our employees are stressed, maybe they're not enough motivated, we're not having good customer interactions, our customer service is slammed, it's not going well and all. And they start finding out small, small solutions, like, and something that is very short term, if I may put like that. But they are afraid to tap into the audit of the culture of the organization, where they actually have to see what everyone is thinking at a very deep rooted level. So there are a lot of ways in which we can work towards it. So I'm going to combine two theories and discuss with you, like, which theoretically I've put how to work on, like, changing the culture. So one is everyday reframing, and one is a systematic approach. So systematic approach was given by Sheen, in which the psychologist said that we do a simple audit of the organization. Now, by simple audit, we mean by interacting with every person. Like, it's not really possible to interact with every person, but to do a psychometric analysis to understand their point of view, how they feel about the organization, and then do some floor analysis, like, speak to everyone and understand what do people actually think about the organization, like, when they're working in it. And then draw, like, a desired picture of what you want the organization to look like, how you want it to be like. Then you work on designing a plan of how you'll implement the desired change. Then you implement it. And then the most important thing is you evaluate it. Why a lot of cultural change management programs fail is people forget the evaluation. They're like, oh, we understood this was the gap, this was the problem, but we've implemented it. Now what? Now what if that fails? What if that was not the problem? So you have to keep on evaluating it to actually see the results. And in this process, you have to recruit new people. You have to go through the entire process of recruiting and selection, of finding new people, and discussing the values that you want them to have, discussing the new vision of the company that you want to set. Then you do appraisals based on people's behavior, of how they have actually accepted the new culture, or they are, accommodating to it with time. So it motivates other people also. By setting an example, you start walking and talking. That's everyday reframing, where you walk and talk the culture. And while you're doing all of these things, some of the practical things that you need to do is first identify the strengths. Another mistake that we might end up doing when we're auditing the culture is we end up focusing on the weaknesses, and we forget to focus on the strengths. So when we are working on the organizational culture, when we are trying to evaluate it, we have to understand first that what are the core mission and vision value statements of this organization. What is their main goal? What do they want to do? Then we need to identify the strengths, like, what do people value the most in this organization, apart from the weaknesses also. Once you've identified the strengths, we also should be able to identify the informal and informal and formal ways of how people behave in the workplace. Like, what is the type of interaction, what are the type of dress codes, how, like, is there post work interaction, do people actually socialize in this workplace, how do they feel emotionally when they come to the workplace, do they feel like it's a burden every day. So companies have started doing small small things. They want to do a mood analysis of every person when they come. So they have, like, when, like, right now it's not there because we went remote, but now that people are coming back, companies used to have, when they check in the organization, they, I'm forgetting the name, those machines where they have to put their attendance for the day, like present and all. While they are putting the present or absent, there also comes a emoticon thing on the remote where they can also feed their mood, and while logging out they can again feed their mood. So these are small small ways in which companies are trying to act mindful in seeing how their employees are feeling, because it's so important to have a healthy culture. Your culture defines your diversity and inclusivity also. A culture which is very masculine, a culture which is very hierarchic, a culture which is not open to uncertainty will have a lot of difficulty in building a diverse workforce, because they're set in their ways. And diverse workforce is so important for innovation, for creativity, for team building. But okay, let's imagine the organization has built a diverse workforce. Now again, if the culture is showing signs of high masculinity and all of that, how will they be inclusive? The first thing is you've made a diverse workforce, then you also have to accommodate all of those people. You have to make them feel engaged, included. So a culture which has more open communication channels, which encourages feedback and from their employees also, which ensures psychological safety, which is a very important concept at the moment, and in organizations where an employee feels comfortable sharing their ideas, and even if they think something is wrong, if that's not happening, the culture is going to suffer eventually, because it will be like everyone is working in a box where there is no innovation, there is no discussion, everyone has a very transactional relationship with the organization, which at a till a certain extent organizations do want, because that ensures structure in the workplace, that the work is being done in a certain way, everything is not haywire. But organizations really need to observe and measure to what degree do they want, and that's how they should set their culture. So a leader plays a paramount role in setting their cultural tone while hiring the employees, while onboarding the employees. So for example, I small case study, like, now that I interact with a lot of people, one person I was interacting with worked in a very 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 renowned bank, and first day of their job, what happened, their key, their the car to enter the building stopped working. So the HR asked them to sit outside and wait, and there was such poor communication between the HR and the manager that the manager had no idea that this has happened, and the manager was super furious at the employee for the first day of their work, and they were like, you know what, sit outside and start working. Now what impression this sets, because there was poor communication. The company must be making billions, but with time, and with time I mean by many, it takes a couple of years for the companies to fall down also, when their culture becomes toxic, if I might put, although it's a very heavy word. And here is where what could have simply helped: communication, right? So that's what a culture is, the backbone of the organization. It reflects how the organization is to the outside of the world. It increases its brand value, it increases its reliability, people start trusting it more. But it has to start within, by the people who make it and how they interact with each other every day. It's really in the company's hand to set the tone. It does become super expensive when you have to recruit new set of people who are comfortable with the new values and beliefs that you want them to have. But eventually it's for their good. So anyone has any questions? Sure, you can ask. Okay, Asya, will this be shared with them? Someone has asked.
Yeah, this recording will be shared with you in a day or two in case you want to rewatch it or send it forward to someone who might be interested in it.
So it will be shared with me, not with the participants.
No, no, no. It will be shared with the participants.
Okay, someone
I
asked.
was answering.
Within- Correct. Okay, to answer your question, Mudis sir, when you're working in a family and there are family disputes, it is definitely very difficult to sort of manage these disputes, and it can lead to a lot of heat and uncomfortable conversations. Here is where it can be suggested that you involve a business coach, a person who has experience in resolving conflicts, or maybe a therapist who can work through the conflicts, because here is where probably you need a mediators, and there are mediators, there are experts who work towards resolving conflicts between two parties, or the two parties can be, one can be dominant or submissive, where one can be employee or employed, or they can be at the same level. So here it will be recommended that you can hire a coach or a mentor who can help you resolve and communicate between the two parties, because when there's a lot of uh, argument, or the relationship between becomes too uncomfortable, anything that the person is trying to explain us, we will not be able to interpret the way they are trying to explain us. We will might, and I will not say always, but might end up taking it in a negative way. You might feel everything that is happening is an attack to us. So in these situations, we can work with a therapist to work on our emotions, to be able to regulate our emotions in the distressful times, and also a coach or a person who can help you resolve these conflicts.
Uh, Hi, actually, I have a question. May I?
Sure.
Yeah, ma'am. Actually, I am just I'm in HR position, and here I am seeing that the organization culture is disturbing. Means few new persons has been came, and the culture is got disturbed as per our ethics and values. So nowadays, what I am seeing, ki management side, they are also accepting that disturb culture. Means they do not care that, about this. So should I interfere and all the things, or what to do, ma'am? Can you suggest?
Sure, you are HR there, right?
Yeah, ma'am.
Okay, and you think the culture has been disturbed. If you can elaborate a little bit on that.
Yeah, actually, what happened in previous 3 to 4 months, more than means more than half of the employee got changed. Means in you can say in higher position, in managerial position, lots of employee got changed, and new people has been came, and they just imposing their previous experience from their previous organizations. So the new culture has been introduced, but this culture is not according to our ethics and values. So should I interfere the management, because the management is also accepting the new culture? So what to do in that situation? What is my role? Should I interfere, or should I means
Okay. Okay, so what first you can do is, first you can, as an HR, identify that what were the previous things that were there in the culture which you think have changed. and then evaluate them, that what are the things which are benefiting the organization and which are not benefiting the organization. Once you are able to analyze these factors, then you can make like speak to one of the management and address this problem to them, that the organization has gone through a change. There are people who have come in and they have brought a new culture, you've accepted it, but there's a possibility that the existing employees might have faced difficulty in adapting to it. These are a
Yeah.
couple of things that I think have benefited us, but these are the things that can be addressed, and then you can take it forward from there.
Yeah, actually, ma'am, what happened? Lots of old employee has been left the organization due to the new culture and new culture introduction, because they are not adapting, because they are thinking it is easy to switch rather than adapting a new culture. So means in that situation, it is very difficult as a HR person to fulfill the manpower requirement.
Correct, correct. So because it is difficult for you to fill the manpower requirement, maybe it's happening because there's a possibility that the top management wants the new things to be introduced. They want the things to be done in the new way. So what you can do is make a inventory of what are the new skills that the organization is looking for, and then hire people accordingly. Because if you think, like, if it is not behavioral and if it's technical things that have changed in the culture, the way things are done technically, and they have introduced new systems, software, new structure, so a lot of times there are employees who are not able to adapt to it. But there's a possibility that the new culture has to be introduced. So what you can do is you can sit with the management and understand that what are the new rules and requirements that they're looking, because there's a possibility that there is still a blurred line between the existing culture which was there and the new one that has to be built. So here is where maybe you must be feeling dissonance, that how should I accommodate both of them, how should I carry the original culture, the vision of the original culture, the values that it held, and introduce the new one. So you can segregate it with the technical aspects and the behavioral aspects, and then see how and who the management level wants to hire.
Ma'am, actually, I'm discussing in behavioral aspect because nothing changed in technical aspect.
Okay.
So I'm talking about the behavioral aspect because when new people has been came, first thing what happened, the old people is not accepting him or her as a manager, or the old people are uh, just creating a syndicate or a group and against the new rules. So it is very difficult as a HR person when all the people from a branch or from a like area is resigning simultaneously.
Yes.
Yeah.
So one thing you can do is if it's behavioral and people are not, so again, as I mentioned, people become too comfortable with the existing culture and they are very resistant and reluctant to change. They don't want to change, and it's very difficult for the human mind to suddenly adapt to new set of rules. So did you try, or you can try an ice breaking session with the new set of management and the existing employees, where you first speak to the existing the new management, and tell
Mhm.
them that these were a couple of things, they were done in a certain way, and now these, okay, we understand that you're trying to introduce it, but it will be nice if you can introduce it in a way that our employees feel that they still belong to the organization. There's a possibility that the employees within the organization who were existing are feeling psychologically unsafe. They are not feeling comfortable because they're feeling lost, since they feel this land has become a little foreign to us. There were ways in which we worked, and now this is not how it's working. So it is the your responsibility along with the management responsibility to introduce a new culture. And I can give an example. For example, when in my organization, initially I had introduced flexible working, and this was there for at least 6 months, where everyone could work on their times. And then a time came when I realized flexible working is not working for us, because it is leading to poor communication among people. And uh, there's a lot of delay in finalizing things. So I decided to come up with a proper structure, where I decided that I have to introduce 10 to 6 working timings, and everyone works within those timings. There was a lot of resistance from a couple of people who were working with me, and we gave them time to ease in. We were not like, okay, take time, adjust to it, but because now you're working continuously for 8 hours, of course with breaks. So there were people also who left. And it was a while for them also to realize that this is not working out for them. So it is also okay to let go when the company is going through transition, and when they're trying to establish a new structure. It is your responsibility as an HR, along with the management responsibility, to make sure that the changes which you are introducing and implementing are going to benefit the organization.
Sure, ma'am.
And if you have further queries, you can also book a consultation with me.
Yes, sure.
Great. So, are there any other questions?
Yeah, there is one more. Yeah.
Another question.
So the other question is, if
Yeah, so the other question is if creativity, curiosity, and innovation are not valued nor encouraged within the firm, what can one do?
Okay. So, if creativity, innovation, value, and values are not encouraged in the organization, it will eventually become a little redundant and mundane for an individual to work. So they can definitely speak with the HR of the organization or directly to their manager, where they can express to them that their roles or their job responsibilities have become too mundane, and which is and if these things start decreasing, your motivation also decreases. So you can discuss with your managers and HRs that this is what you're feeling. And if also giving some time to it, it doesn't add value to you, then that is a sign that you might want to look for another job where you are able to fulfill these needs. I hope I've answered your question. Are there any more questions? um so to answer this question, if you are okay, so burnout, what do we mean by burnout exactly? Burnout is basically when we've reached a state of exhaustion, emotionally, physically, and mentally, where we are feeling that here is a point where we are not able to function properly. It starts affecting with our daily functioning. It starts affecting in our cognition. We are not able to concentrate properly. We're not able to remember things properly. Our sleep is disturbed. Our appetite might be uh, affected. Our behaviors might be different, and we might have episodes of sudden outburst of tears. So here are some signs and symptoms where we might be experiencing burnout in a workplace. So when you've reached the stage of burnout, the right thing to do is to take therapy. when we feel that now these are some signs and symptoms which have started showing in us way too often, where we are not able to concentrate, it is the right time to take therapy. And also let it's very taboo, it's very difficult in the Indian workplaces to let the HRs and upper management know that you want to seek help because you've been experiencing burnout, because there are so many stigmas attached towards seeking help and addressing your emotional and mental well-being. That's what I'm really trying to work towards. But if you have experienced it, then it's the best to seek help. And for all, and in general, it's very important to work like for yourself from the start. It is where you should start taking care of yourself at a primary level, at a level where you equip yourself in a way that you are able to prevent yourself from burnout. So it doesn't just quickly happen, it takes time, it builds up. So here is where our emotional intelligence comes into play, where we're able to sort of be aware. First step, self aware of our signs and symptoms of basically what stresses us out, what motivates us, and then we're able to regulate our emotions. And if we're able to do that with various activities like reflection, journaling, meditation, again therapy, high possibility that we might not reach burnout, because we're aware of what causes us stress and what are the things that might trigger us in the workplace and how to control and manage them. I hope I've answered your question.
No, ma'am, no questions in the chat box. Yeah.
Thank you, Asya.
Okay, so I guess we can conclude this very interactive and insightful session here.